I spoke to Michael Kugelman from the Woodrow Wilson Center. He's deputy director of their Asia program. I asked him what needs to be done to make sure this dispute over Kashmir does not completely blow out of control.
Well, I think that the immediate challenge for the Indian state is to figure out how to deal with the very real threat of unrest in Kashmir. I mean, as you know, there's been a lockdown in Kashmir that has prevented Kashmiris from doing anything, including leaving their homes. They're cut off from communications. But eventually, India will need to ease its grip on Kashmir. And what happens then? You know, will you have people come out in the streets and stage violent protest? I would argue that the repeal of Article 370 could even be the spark for a new phase of the insurgency in Kashmir. How India tries to handle that, if it tries to preemptively fend off the possibility of violence or what, that's the big concern. The other issue here is Pakistan. How might Pakistan respond? Pakistan did not like India's move to repeal Article 370 because Pakistan has always claimed the region of Jammu and Kashmir. So the question is, what will Pakistan do? Will it try to use some of its militant assets to try to cause trouble inside Kashmir? Or will it be happy with mounting a diplomatic campaign to try to get the world to condemn India? That remains to be seen. But those are the two key issues. How will India deal with the very real risk of unrest?
As he stated, that India and Pakistan are headed down a path of confrontation.
A lot depends on how Pakistan behaves itself. If it overreacts, we are being very cool in India. In fact, our Prime Minister said we have to adopt a statesman-like position. It's an internal matter. And we are not interested in escalating this conflict. You know, this is an administrative reorganization of Kashmir that was always a part of India since the 7 decades ago. So for Pakistan to meddle and interfere and to try and internationalize this, that is their strategy, because they cannot match India conventionally. So they want to bring in third parties, fourth parties, crying about alleged human rights violations and such things. But the reality is that these measures are not like pinpricks. And frankly, cancellation of trade with India, the volume is like hardly $2 billion. Most of our trade is not with Pakistan at all. And it's not going to affect us. And nor is it going to compel us to change. But I suspect the real problem is not what they're publicly announcing. The real problem is they're going to unleash the same old jihadist poison that has destabilized Kashmir for many decades. They have terrorist masterminds who have not been brought to book. Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, publicly admitted in his recent US trip that we have 30,000 to 40,000 armed actors who need to be reined in. That's his estimate. And if a government is saying it, that's conservative. So we are talking about, a large-scale jihadist menace that is looming across the border, and India is preparing for it, So trade ties and cutting off, cultural links is a bad idea. We don't want to take this forward. But if they decide to go more aggressive and use force, I think we are prepared with counter force. We have the deterrent measures at the border, and that's why we have deployed forces in advance of this move to prevent any kind of mischief or adventurism by Pakistan.
Victoria Schofield, Indian lawyers. Today, in a part of the world that has helped spark 3 wars, tens of thousands of troops are patrolling the streets. They are Indian government forces in Indian-controlled Kashmir. And it's been 4 days since the Indian government changed the status of Kashmir, which is India's only Muslim-majority region. Up until this week, Kashmir had a large degree of autonomy. The government's decision has sparked protests over a long-disputed area claimed by both India and Pakistan, where fighting has killed tens of thousands of people over the last few decades. Here with Ambassador Frank Wisner. He had a nearly 40-year diplomatic career and served in senior positions in both the State and Defense Departments during Republican and Democratic administrations. He was ambassador to India during the Clinton administration. Ambassador, thank you very much for coming on the NewsHour. Fundamentally, what does it mean that Kashmir's status has been shifted?
Well, it means a great deal. The regime under which Kashmir has lived since the late 1940s has given it a measure of autonomy that mixes very deeply with the psychology and sense of belonging of the overwhelming majority of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Removing that is going to understandably create a great deal of ruction. It will create a lot of emotion across the border with Pakistan, and it will create a certain amount of attention on the global stage.
And we've seen that emotion both in India and Pakistan and global stage. Here we are talking about it. The BJP, the ruling party in India, and its Prime Minister Narendra Modi have been talking about this move for a long time. But why do you think they've made it now?
Well, that's precisely the point. They have signaled well in advance that the party, if returned with a new mandate, would go to Parliament and seek a change that would not only end the special status, but would sever the territory of Jammu and Kashmir into two portions and have them both centrally ruled. They chose this time, and they chose it very carefully, once they had in place a comprehensive plan to control the consequences of a political decision that the government made very carefully. They deployed forces, they closed off telecommunications, they've closed down radio, they've picked up people who might be in opposition. It was a carefully set out and very carefully deployed plan.
And you said that they would be able to accept or manage the political consequences. Will there be political consequences for them for this move?
They've taken all the legal steps the Indian system would call for. Will that calm the passions of those on the ground in Kashmir? No, it won't. Will it make others uneasy, Indian Muslims? Will it calm those in Pakistan who continue to claim that Pakistan has a legitimate say in the future of Kashmir? None of those will happen. The government's not trying to satisfy those audiences.
We saw in the story that played just a few minutes ago President Trump weighing in on this when he was asked by Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan in the Oval Office. He said that he would not mind being a mediator. Did that statement impact the timing of this?
In my view, it did not. This was much too carefully planned. There were too many moving parts in play. I can't say that the president's statement received anything but negative reactions in India, but I don't think it was a triggering event.
You talked about the emotions running high. We saw protests both in Delhi and, of course, in multiple places in Pakistan. How fundamental is this for Pakistan? These countries have fought 3 wars in the past. Is this something that could cause there to be more conflict?
Well, I do not predict that there will be open conflict between India and Pakistan. I think that's probably unlikely. But will there be a rise in the short run in jihadi terrorist attempts to cross the border from Pakistan into the Indian side? I think that's highly possible. Can you imagine circumstances in which there will be a higher level of militancy within Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir? I can imagine that as well. But I don't see overall warfare between the two sides. What one must worry about, though, is with an increase in low-level jihadi violence that India retaliates, Pakistan retaliates, and you can have a very unpleasant circumstance.
And fundamentally, is that the main U.S. interest here, that these two countries' conflict does not happen and tensions decrease?
Well, clearly that's an American interest. But I would underscore a separate point. India is a great nation. It is a major factor on the world stage. We're moving into a world order in which large nations have to keep some sense of balance. We need a balanced relationship with India. We are not in a position to tell India what to do one way or the other. India will pursue its own ambitions, and its government, elected with an overwhelming majority, has taken this decision. Whether that's a popular one outside of India or inside Kashmir or Pakistan, it is the decision of the Indian government, and they intend to make it stick.
Ambassador Frank Wisner, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Secretary General has been following the situation in Jammu and Kashmir with concern and makes an appeal for maximum restraint. The position of the United Nations on this region is governed by the Charter of the United Nations and applicable Security Council resolutions. The Secretary General also recalls the 1972 Agreement on Bilateral Relations between India and Pakistan, also known as the Simla Agreement, which states that the final status of Jammu and Kashmir is to be settled by peaceful means in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations. The Secretary General is also concerned over reports of restrictions on the Indian side of Kashmir, which could exacerbate the human rights situation in the region. The Secretary General calls on all parties to refrain from taking steps that could affect the status of Jammu and Kashmir.
साथियों, हमारे देश का लोकतंत्र इतना मजबूत है, लेकिन आप ये जानकर चौंक जाएंगे कि जम्मू कश्मीर में दशकों से हजारों लाखों की संख्या में ऐसे भाई बहन रहते हैं जिन्हें लोकसभा के चुनाव में उसमें तो वोट डालने का अधिकार था, लेकिन वो विधानसभा और वहां की पंचायत या वहां की नगरपालिका या वहां की महानगरपालिका न वो चुनाव में मतदान कर सकते थे न चुनाव लड़ सकते थे.
Ann Patterson, Ambassador, great to have you.
Thank you so much, John. It's always a pleasure to be on your show. Yes, this actually should be on the front page because every time it comes up, these are two nuclear-armed countries, obviously. Maybe it's far away, so people don't concentrate on it, but it basically has been going on since 1947, since the partition of India and Pakistan. And the basic issue is that the Kashmir is a Muslim majority population, but at partition it was annexed to India because the princeling in charge was a Hindu and he basically gave it to India. They've gone to war twice over this, in 1965 and 1999, and Prime Minister Modi basically annexed this. I think that's the right word. It's a strong word, but he annexed it a few days ago. And the Pakistanis are extremely upset. They're also upset, I think, because they've had a very difficult time getting international support for their position. So it's a dicey situation.
When you were ambassador to Pakistan, how important was this to the Pakistani leadership at that time?
It was very important. It was very important psychologically because frankly, they had been supporting some of the insurgents, well, really for decades.
Right.
And it was a symbol of national pride. The other issue, of course, is that India is their historic enemy, and as they see it. And so they feel particularly boxed in by India. India, of course, in fairness, is a runaway success story economically, and Pakistan is lagged behind. So there's a lot of economic jealousy there, too. But it's an important issue, particularly for the Pakistan Army.
Probably were very upset by this. And so it's almost a situation like you have with the Iranian Revolutionary, the IRA, right? The Iranian military sometimes acts independently of the government. Could the same thing happen here?
Well, that is sort of what happened in 1999 when Musharraf moved the military up there, and the civilian leader basically had to come to the United States and beg Bill Clinton to intervene and solve the situation for him. And that really was what happened then. I suppose it could happen now. It looks like they're trying, at least temporarily, to find some diplomatic solution, unsuccessfully trying to find some diplomatic solution. But yes, you could see that. You could see a very aggressive element in the Pakistani military because, frankly, it's a huge blow to their pride. And pride matters a lot in really most countries. So yes, you could see something like that. I don't know if I don't know the current leader of the Pakistan military as well as I knew, of course, the ones when I was there. So I don't know what his personality, or Musharraf was actually in charge of the special forces. So yes, you could see something like that happen. Now, I think an interesting question is, why did Modi do this now? And there are a lot of theories out there. One, which I say, but I dismiss it, was when President Trump offered to intervene a few weeks back. I think that was just sort of a throwaway. But I think the more important issue is that the Indians saw that we were very close to a deal with the Taliban in Afghanistan, and that we'd need Pakistan's cooperation for that, and that U.S. relations with Pakistan would probably warm considerably because of that, so they decided to move now.
So neither of us know the answer to this, so it's somewhat of a rhetorical question, but what do you think the president's position is going to be? Sometimes he's a little unpredictable on these things. He can't be happy about it, right? So will he do nothing? Do you think he'll jawbone it? What do you think?
On the Kashmir thing, I think
Yes.
he'll basically keep his head down.
Right.
He's sort of a little unpredictable, but he's going to have all kinds of conflicting priorities here. One, his relation with Modi, from everything I could see, is first rate. And multiple administrations have reached out to India as a powerhouse, an economic powerhouse, investment powerhouse, but most importantly as a counterweight to China. And from everything I could see, the President Trump's administration has done exactly the same. They've developed close ties with India because they see that as India is an important strategic partner for our future. That doesn't mean we don't need relations with Pakistan too. So I suspect he'll just sort of play it cool. We'll see.
Well, he's in between a rock and a hard place, and I think this is why Modi, who, by the way, has proven, Ambassador Patterson, to be a very, very astute and formidable international leader. I mean, a lot of the things he does, his timing is right. He's aggressive, but he seems to know the geopolitical landscape. His instincts are pretty sound. I mean, if you look at what he did here, they wanted to do this for some time. He did it, and he does it at a time where the president, I think you're right, he's going to keep his head down because he's got a great relationship with Modi in India. They're the counterweight to China, especially what's going on right now with the tariffs.
Exactly.
He absolutely needs the full support of the Pakistani government and their regime right now in the Taliban negotiations to get troops out and to fulfill one of the campaign promises he had going into 2020. So he's got these two allies that he's got to stay on great terms with, that are at odds with one another. And so sometimes you can't, whatever you do is wrong, so you do nothing. And I think that's what Modi banked on.
I think that's what, I think they'll make statements, statements about how there should be a peaceful resolution and no violence and all that kind of stuff. I mean, basically, basically statements that don't mean very much. But I suspect he'll stay out of the substance. And again, I agree with you entirely. I've been super impressed with Modi. And there's no question he's a Hindu nationalist, a very aggressive Hindu nationalist. But frankly, I watched this speech that he had made about Kashmir, and I thought it was extremely effective. Obviously, it was for the Indian public about why he was doing this, but he's extremely articulate and extremely cogent. And of course, let's also be fair. India has thrived under his rule.
I mean, it's tough to argue with the economic success that they've had. Their growth is unprecedented. Was it like 8 or 9% annually?
Yeah.
I mean, right now it's the envy of the world. We're at 3%, and we're doing handstands over it and saying this is the best economy in 5 decades. And they typically, India's been doing GDP growth 6, 7, 8, 9%. They go to 7, like it's a bad quarter for them. So they're having tremendous growth. They're educating their people. Also, he's put in a lot of education reforms, health reforms. They're spending a lot of money building roads, bathrooms. I mean, people forget there's a lot of parts of India don't have running water and things of that nature, don't have a road. They got dirt roads. So they've done a lot with infrastructure since Modi's been there, but he's a very effective leader, very convincing, and he's able to rally people. And that nationalist tenor that he has, coupled with a tremendous economy, has given him a lot of juice, no question.
And a lot of influence internationally. Let's not downplay that. I mean, again, this has been a high priority across a number of years for the United States to work with India. And when I was in Pakistan, I don't know the statistics now, but there were something like 70 million Indians still without electricity. So there are, very significant pockets of poverty still in India. But he's done a good job, as you say, about trying to resolve that and bring development to rural India. And the educational system, the production of engineers, the production of scientists has been really quite remarkable.
He also
is very controversial. It's causing quite a fiery debate. What do you think was the motive behind this?
See, when we talk about Kashmir, normally we see the assumption is that the people of few districts of southern and central Kashmir constitute the Kashmir. But the state of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh was a very diverse, multi-ethnic, multi-caste, multi-religious state. And what Article 370, which was a temporary provision, had done was to concentrate power in the hand in the few districts of the valley, and among the few political dynasties and the radical separatists. Which meant that the other sections of the society were not getting their due rights, like the Buddhist of Ladakh. They always complained that their script, their culture is being repressed. The Dalits, the low caste people in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, were by law not allowed to pick up any other government job but to clean the drains and do the sweepings. The thousands of refugees, mostly the Sikh refugees who came from the other side during the partition, were still denied the permanent residency rights, the voting rights. The tribals of the Jammu and Kashmir, who are mostly Muslims, were treated as the second-class citizens. So the problem is that the Article 370 was brought in for a different purpose as a temporary phenomenon, but it was being used to deny these rights to the people of the Jammu and Kashmir.
Okay, Prakash.
So I think by removing that, the government has done away, and by fully imposing the constitution.
All right. I have a question for you. Article 370, but attached to it was a plebiscite, and she described this as settler colonialism. Very quickly, what's your response to that?
Well, there was no promise of conducting a plebiscite in the Kashmir. There is no such document, no such promise from the Parliament of India. Second point, the plebiscite would have happened under the UN resolution when Pakistan were to withdraw on the territory of the Kashmir which it occupies and hand it back over to India. Only then there was a provision of holding the referendum in the Jammu and Kashmir. But now the demographies have changed. The Pakistan in its sides has completely changed the demography of the Kashmir, settling Punjabis and the Afghans. In the northern parts of the Jammu and Kashmir, which is the Gilgit and Baltistan, they have done the ethnic cleansing of the Shias and settled the outsiders there. Within the Kashmir itself, the Hindus had been ethnically cleansed by the Kashmiri separatists. So there is no question of doing referendum now because the demography itself has changed.
Okay. Anwar Iqbal, the Pakistanis have responded. If this is for the good of the Kashmiris, why are they under lockdown right now?
See, we know for the last 30 years there is a militant insurgency in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which has been going on. And especially over the last decade, this insurgency has converted itself into in pan-Islamist jihad, which is not fighting for the Kashmiri cause anymore, is the demand of caliphate, which we are seeing in Kashmir now. So the point is that we know if we do not put in the security measures now, we are not going to put the security measures now, there would have been the risk of the terror attacks, there have been the risk of the stone peltings. Lots of them have been funded by well-organized rings to do the stone pelting. And we also see the propaganda emerging from the Pakistani side on the Twitter and WhatsApp. All of the handles are provoking violence, and all of them have their origin in the Pakistan. So we have to take protective and preventive measures to make sure that law and order does not deteriorate.
We are going to have...
Obviously has nuclear weapons too. Well, what exactly has India achieved so far by this unilateral decision for direct rule of Jammu and Kashmir and that region?
We have complied with the promise we made to the public of India that we'll remove this nonsensical curb put on the Constitution of India. We are one country, we can't have two constitutions. And we can't have two different laws on who can settle where. And freedom of travel is in a basic part. equality of gender, that is men and women, that's also our fundamental right in Article 14 of the Constitution. So we have just complied with the promises we made during the election.
Yeah, but it's been in the man. I just can't see that there are people in Washington who would be happy to see the revocation of Article 370 so that there are tensions between India and China.
Well, I think any Democrat who knows constitutional principles should have been aghast that we took so long, that Indians cannot invest in Kashmir. It's the most beautiful part of India, and we would like to develop it as a tourist center.
Well, Mike Pompeo is reportedly trumpeting the anti-China U.S. alliance. What did you make of the fact that the U.S. has even allowed India to use ports in Iran, the port Chabahar in Iran, not something it allows other countries to do when it comes to Iran? The Royal Navy is patrolling near there.
Well, we never asked Americans for permission. Iran is a good friend. They're a Shia country, and we have a lot of trouble with Wahhabi Muslims. So we think we should be friends with Iran. The Shias within India are very, very supportive of the Hindu community here. And I can tell you that I'm considered a friend of China, I think both in India and in China. And I don't see the Chinese temperature rising beyond what they want to demonstrate to Pakistan.
Well, they've said it's unacceptable. I presume you've checked whether you still have a visa for China.
Me, I don't need a visa.
I suppose the BJP line is that economic development in Kashmir will also curb terrorism in the region. The 7/7 attacks in London, so they say, were committed by people trained in Kashmiri terrorism camps. Is India ready for the response from hardline Islamists? Who knows? Coming from Syria, let alone via Afghanistan, to attack Indian installations?
Well, first of all, let me tell you, we don't think that terrorism has anything to do with economics. It's a madness, and it has to be treated as a madness. But the people of Kashmir have been denied development, and it's a beautiful place. It should be developed, and the reason is that nobody wants to go and invest there with all this Article 370 and its implications. That's why we are very keen to develop Kashmir. And as far as Syrians and the Talibanis and all welcome. Let them come and try. We are ready for the Islamic terrorists anytime.
Well, anyway, no one can